Does anyone know who August Landmesser is? I want some participation now. Anybody? No? August Landmesser, in her book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, Discontents of Our Origins, wrote about August Landmesser. August Landmesser, as you can see, is standing amongst the crowd of his fellow citizens amongst the Nazis. Interesting thing about August Landmesser is that when everybody was going along to get along, he stood against the crowd. He stood against the tide with his arms folded, refusing to hail the Nazi salute. When I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I initially thought about, there's been over 50,000 TEDx events, and if I could do something different from everyone else, what would it be? And I thought about, I want to make this the quickest TEDx speech that there has ever been, right? And then I thought about Winston Churchill, and he gave the quickest speech, and he said, never give up, right? Never, ever give up. But then I thought about, well, I can't do that because by the time I explain what I'm trying to do, I'll be way past that time, right? But what do we talk about? When we think about all of the speeches that we watch on TEDx and the speeches that we've listened to, we hear a lot of things. We hear a lot of speeches about growth, about goal setting, leadership, and all of those things. And then I thought about something that is common to me. If you know me, you know that I always ask the question, well, at least if you call me, I always ask, what are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? Well, there's a whole lot of things that I am grateful for, but interestingly, I am so grateful that today we get to sit here and talk about the things that matter to me and what I believe matters to you. When I think about what I'm grateful for, and I think about life, and I think about the lens that we all use, and you think about photographers, you think about videographers, they all use lenses. And so my question today is, what lens are you using? When we talk about lenses, it could be a lens of your community. It could be a lens in your family. It could be your job. It could be your family, whatever it may be. What lens are you using? But the more important question is that lens in focus? Is your lens in focus? Now, the easy conversation is to talk about family. But you don't really know my family. I don't know your family, so we'll bypass that. The hard lens to talk about is the political lens, right? I mean, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, and if you went to University of South Dakota in Vermillion, you may have the GDIs. And if you don't know what a GDI is, you'll have to look that up. Some people know what GDI is, right? But when we think about the political lens and how we're seeing that, is that lens in focus? I mean, think about this. In 2020, since 2020 at least, over a third of our state legislatures have enacted voting rights laws. But the question becomes why? Why? Was there a big reason to enact those new laws? And then we think of some of the other things that they've enacted. There's a state right now that is honoring the Confederate flag. The question is why? Because also that same state, in honoring the Confederate flag, has enacted a law that says that if you talk about the very thing that this comes from, that you'll be breaking the law. We ask ourselves, why? Why is that? How is it that we can celebrate one thing that affects so many people, but yet the thing that we need to do to talk about it, we can't do, right? Interesting. Folks, that's a fuzzy lens. It's a fuzzy lens. And my point in this is that I want to challenge you because we have people making decisions for us based on whatever it is that they believe and not what we believe. See, the beautiful thing about being grateful and being grateful for a country that we live in, that we can challenge our political figures, we can challenge them and we can hold them accountable. Because here's the thing, when we think about America and we think about where we've come from, remember, we are about a country of community, right? We're about a country of communing, coming together, holding our fellow man, picking them up. And yet, right now, when I look at the political landscape, I'm concerned. I'm concerned because when I see something like this, and yet I hear, what's the common term? CRT, critical race theory. Anybody know what that means? I mean, nobody knows what it means, right? Taking a critical, at this point, we've all talked about it enough that maybe we've looked at. But think about this for a minute. We're always taught to be critical thinkers. And if we're taught to be critical thinkers, and then we think about critical race, isn't it just us looking at using a critical lens to understand race and why we are where we are today? Is that a problem? Is it a problem? Shouldn't be. But yet a politician says that it is. I do diversity trainings. And in my diversity trainings, I talk about diversity. But I have politicians telling me that if I talk about diversity, especially in a school setting, that I could be breaking the law. Imagine that. The very act of me talking about where the Confederate flag comes from, the historical context of it means that I could be breaking the law. All I'm asking you to do is to focus your lens, especially as it relates to politics. I'm not saying politicians are bad. All I'm saying is that it's up to us, up to you and up to me to hold them accountable for the decisions that they make on your behalf. Because remember, it's about community, right? It's about service. That's what our politicians should be doing, serving us. I mean, let's take a step back. If you stop and think about it, earlier I said we have Republicans, we have Democrats. But at the end of the day, what is it that each one of us want in this life? I mean, is it safe to say that we all want a safe neighborhood? Is that safe to say? Is it safe to say that we want a cost-effective education for our children? Is that safe to say? Is it safe to say that we only want just a little bit more in our paychecks? That we can go on vacation, we can buy a steak instead of chicken, right? I mean, is it safe to say that? Folks, that's not a partisan thing. That's a community thing. That's a real thing. For us to want to have a bigger paycheck, for us to want to have good health care, for us to want to have good education, for us to want to have a safe community. That's not a partisan thing. That's a community thing. That's a person thing. That's us. That's who we are. That's a community. That's us communing together, understanding, lifting each other up. Because at the end of the day, all we want is just a little piece of the pie, right? My pie doesn't have to be bigger than your pie. I just want a piece of it. You want a piece of it? I know when we talk about politics, it's that rebel, it's that radical thing, and we go, what in the world, what are we doing? So I'll bring it back to what are we grateful for? Because here's the thing, when we think about what we're grateful for, it allows us to not think about the bad things. As I mentioned earlier, when you call me, the first thing I say on my phone voicemail is that before you leave a message, tell me one thing that you're grateful for. The most beautiful thing about that is that when people call, they can be in a bad mood. And then they'll say, well, you know what? I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful that I have a job. Some people have said, I'm grateful for you, Ike. I like that myself personally. But it's been so successful. And here's the funny thing. When I decided to do that probably 15 years ago, I was only doing it for a period of time. I thought, well, we'll change it up a little bit and we'll do this. But it was such a hit that I decided to leave it. Because more often than not, people tell me, man, I love your message. People loved it so much that they even made a mural of it. Wow, imagine that, right? Isn't that great? Tell me something you're grateful for. What are you grateful for? What are you grateful for? What I want you to do is I want you to look to the person to your left, the person to your right, and I want you to tell them one thing that you're grateful for. Go ahead, tell them one thing you're grateful for. I love it. Look at the smiles. It's awesome. Well, I can tell you one thing that I am grateful for. I am grateful that we live in a country that we can hold our elected officials accountable. I'm thankful and I'm grateful that we live in a place that we can share our dreams, we can share our hopes, we can truly, truly hope. But the one thing that I'm really grateful for, I'm grateful that for a moment in time, for this opportunity, that I'm able to challenge you just for a moment to take a look at your lens and to see if it's in focus. Is your lens in focus? If not, focus it. Thank you.